took a bagel!
All right, time to swing, just like I taught you.
Welcome back. In today's video, we are going to be looking at Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Spider-Man?
You know, that's funny. I get that a lot.
Hey.
We are your hosts, Matt and Gio. Today we are drinking something new. Something fancy.
Something new. This is Vodka and Sprite. So
Yep.
we got away from our usual rum and Coke or whiskey and Coke
Yep.
to just vodka and Sprite. So this movie was directed by Bob Persichetti. I think I'm saying that right. This is actually his first movie that he has ever directed. He was a writer on The Little Prince, and he was a storyboard artist for like Shrek 2, Monsters vs. Aliens, Wallace and Gromit. But this was actually his first movie that he ever directed. So yeah, Bob Persichetti. This movie was produced by Avi Arad, Amy Pascal, Phil Lord, and Christopher Miller. And the music in this movie, and I want to bring up the music just because I really thought it was kind of neat. I really enjoyed the score to this film. The music was by Daniel Pemberton. He's also done the scores for movies such as Ocean's 8, King Arthur Legend and the Sword, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., Enemies of the People, The Awakening, and Blood. So he's done a little bit, and I thought you did a really good job in this movie too.
So I'll go into the actors here. Some of the actors are Shameik Moore, who plays Miles Morales, Jake Johnson, who plays one of the Peter Parkers in the movie, Haley Steinfeld plays Gwen Stacy, Lily Tomlin plays Aunt May, and we have Liv Schreiber, who plays Wilson Fisk, and also Chris Pine stars in this one, playing one of the Peter Parkers as well. Of course, there's a cameo Stan Lee, so that would be fun to see too.
Yeah, definitely. It's not a Marvel movie without a Stan Lee cameo, and you know we're unfortunately not going to get too many of those going forward. But it was nice to see one in this movie. So you know, to kind of give you an idea of what the movie is about. In this movie, we meet Miles Morales, who is a middle school age child, while visiting an abandoned subway station with his uncle Aaron, he gets bitten by a radioactive spider. After realizing he had gained new powers from the spider bite, Miles goes back to the abandoned subway station to kind of investigate a little bit more, and here he finds Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, who's in the middle of a fight against Green Goblin, Wilson Fisk, and some others. They're fighting around this collider machine that Wilson Fisk is developing in order to open dimensions to another portal. Wilson Fisk is doing this in order to see and find alternate versions of his wife and child who have recently passed away. However, at the end of the fight, Miles did get a chance to speak to Peter Parker very briefly, but Peter Parker was unfortunately killed by Wilson Fisk. As a result of the machine being turned on, even just for the few minutes that it was, other spider people from other dimensions came into Miles Morales' dimension unwittingly. These include Peter B. Parker, who is basically an older and maybe a little, more carefree or less serious version of the Peter Parker that had just passed away. We also have Gwen Stacy, Peter Parker Noir from the 1930s, Penny Parker from the 3100s, and Peter Porker. These spider people help Miles focus and use his new power, and as a result, Miles is able to help them all get home to their appropriate dimensions, and at the same time take down Wilson Fisk and his machine.
All right, well, thanks for that breakdown there, Matt.
Yeah.
We'd like to first go ahead and start off talking about the characters in this, the different Spider-Mans in this movie.
We had Miles Morales, who is basically kind of the main character of the movie. We had two different Peter Parkers, one of whom died at the beginning of the movie, and then the other
was played by Chris Pine.
Chris Pine. And then the other was a older Peter B. Parker, who was kind of maybe a little bit careless.
He's more like he's already been through everything already.
Yeah.
And there's like scenes in the movie, like he was talking to Miles Morales when he meets up, and he's asking him like about tips and whatnot. He's basically telling him how to not shave. with his suit. And so they're just those types of scenes in the movie. We also have Spider-Gwen, who's actually Gwen Stacy. We have Spider-Ham, who's mentioning the synopsis as Peter Porker. And we have the Spider-Man Noir, and also Penny Parker. So the different things about those characters that I was looking at. So Miles Morales was first appeared in The Ultimate Fallout #4. That was created by Brian Mitchell and Sarah Pichelli. Also in a more recent comic book series called Absolute Carnage, he was actually deemed to have the strongest willpower of all the Spider-Man. There was a symbiote that was trying to take over, enslave him, and he was actually able to will his way away from that symbiote while the other Peter Parkers weren't able to, and also even the great Captain America wasn't able to as well. So that just shows the strength that he had for Miles Morales. Gwen Stacy, she debuted in The Edge of Spider-Verse #2. She also had different aliases: Spider-Woman, Ghost Spider, or a couple of them. And that series was back in starting in about 2015 is when she was able to have her own series. The Spider-Man Noir.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Gwen Stacy, like her character originated as like a love interest for Peter Parker, right?
Yes, that was, I believe, the first love interest, first real love interest of Peter Parker. And then she was, in the comic book series, she was killed by the Green Goblin. And so that was a different twist here. Especially in this movie, it showed when it was going back to Gwen Stacy's or Spider-Gwen's background, it shows her killing the lizard, and then it turns out that lizard was Peter Parker. So that was a different spin there as well. Then we have Spider-Man Noir, which actually he first appeared in February 2009, and that was set in the 1930s during the Great Depression era. So that was different there. We have Penny Parker, and she was introduced in 2014 at The Edge of Spider-Verse #5. The way that worked out was she was bitten by a spider, but she let the spider bite her so they can control her dad's robot. So they actually had a psychic connection.
Yeah, and it's weird because, like, me not being familiar with, the comics, like, I had heard of Miles Morales just because, when the character Peter Parker died a few years ago, like, that was a big thing, like, in the comics. And, Miles Morales was kind of the one who sort of took over after that. And then I had heard of Gwen Stacy just because of the Amazing Spider-Man movies. But other than that, I had never heard of the other ones. I heard of Spider-Pig, from the Simpsons thing, but I don't think that's the same thing. But I was actually surprised to learn that Peter Parker actually had a little bit of history. That character has been around for a good while now. I think I saw that it first showed up in 1983.
Yep. And he actually had his own, like a 17 series run in 1985, starting there. And after that, then he was basically in and out of different, like as a backup in different comic books. The way he was bitten, he was actually bitten by
he was a spider bitten by a pig, right?
Yeah, a pig, and that was interconnected with a scientist. So that's how that happened. So, and there's actually, I went ahead and looked at like different characters from his series. So they had, instead of a Kingpin, it was King Pig. Instead of Doctor Doom, it was Duck Doom, I believe.
Duck Doom.
Yeah. And then the Raven the Hunter, and then Beyonder. So that was pretty interesting. Just the way they twisted up the names and to be able to match that universe.
It was kind of funny. And then, I see here it's Peter Porker, the Spectacular Spider-Ham. But yeah, it was interesting. Like, I had no idea that all these different spider people, like, existed, like, in this universe. The only one that I knew existed, like I said, was Gwen Stacy, but I didn't even know that she was, like a spider person. I thought that she was a love interest, and that was it. I learned a lot about the character of Spider-Man and all the different incarnations of Spider-Man from watching this movie. The other interesting thing about this movie too was just the way that all of the characters were like designed and how they looked. And a lot of that just has to do with the animation style of this movie. It was different. Like it's not something that I'm used to seeing in a lot of, I guess, animated movies of recent late. I don't know what you would even call this style of animation, but it was definitely different. Like maybe I think it was like they were kind of almost trying to make it look like an animated comic strip.
Yeah, there's parts of the movie like there's a movie with Keanu Reeves called Scanner Darkly, and it kind of like reminded me like the same, I guess, illustration. It kind of reminded me of that movie quite a bit. No, but I agree that the illustration and the animation in this movie is very good, especially in terms of how they try to bring that comic book to life, especially how they bring up the thoughts in his head versus
Yeah.
actual quotes that were done. So, no, you're absolutely right on that.
Yeah, and they had a lot of moments in the movie where if someone was like yelling or falling, they would actually like spell out like "whoa" or "ah" or whatever, and it was kind of like, you know, like you would see in a comic book. And like even the characters, even though it was an animated film, especially with like Spider Ham, Peter Porker, I feel like they just made like he was like a straight up cartoon character. I feel like his animation was different from the other characters. It's weird to explain, but it's almost like that character's animation style was different than all the others. I don't know if you really picked up on
Well,
that or noticed that, but like
well, I noticed that like the different animation styles for all the different characters. So like Penny Parker's and her robot, it had that anime style
yeah.
like drawn, and then you have Peter Porker who had that drawn style you're talking about, and then you have Spider-Man Noir who had kind of like the old-fashioned drawn, like kind of like almost like a pencil drawn, like just shading.
Yeah.
And then you had Miles Morales. His is more. It's interesting because his more had like a different type of like that newer animation, I guess, but not like a C. Well, it's kind of hard to explain, I guess. But yeah, they all had their own style of animation, kind of resembles where that character came from.
Like I remember when I first started watching the movie, like when I first turned it on, because when I watched this movie this last week, this was the first time I had ever seen it. When we decided that we were gonna do this movie, I went into it completely not knowing what to expect. I had not seen the movie. I kind of knew that it, you know, brought in other Spider-Man characters, but honestly, I guess I thought it was gonna be like, you know, I knew about Miles Morales and Peter Parker, but I guess I thought it was gonna be like those same characters, but from other comic universes. Which it kind of was, but at the same time it kind of wasn't. But that's another topic. Yeah, when I started watching it, I don't know, the animation style. It like at first almost seemed kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like jumpy. I don't know if that's the right word. Like it didn't seem very fluid, like the kind that you see in a lot of animated movies. The animation was not as fluid as I am used to in other animated movies. I don't know if you got the same thing. It was a lot more colorful, especially that last fight scene where all the dimensions were kind of converging into each other.
Yeah.
All the colors in that. I mean, it was like that. That was that was trippy, man. Like I felt like if you're, you know, if I had had a little bit more to drink while I was watching that, like I would have been.
No, but I agree. Like in terms of how it was set up, like there was parts in the movie where it was very out of focus, while others are more clear, and then other parts, it was the same parts that was out of focus was in focus when it needed to be.
Yeah.
So it looked like everything was very deliberate in how they were setting. It wasn't like, oh, this was a mistake, or we just wanted to look this way. There's some parts where it looks like they were like layered, kind of like like you're wearing 3D glasses type thing, and it had like that kind of layering on top of each other with that like kind of halo effect around it. When things glitched, it's very known that it glitched. The colors changed, everything changed.
Oh yeah, it wasn't just like staticky. It was like when something glitched, like all these colors came out.
And then depending on the characters, the color effect is very, very pronounced. So like when the Prowler came out, like
It
you
was
can
very
tell,
shadowy.
like, yeah, dark, shadowing. Of course, he's purple, so they made sure it's emphasized that he is purple. So I see that they put a lot of effort and a lot of work into this one. Now, time for our quick takes.
So we talked about all the different Spider people that were in this movie, like the Peter Parkers and the Gwen Stacy and the other Peter Parker and the Penny Parker and the Peter Porker and the Miles Morales. But there were actually a lot of other Spider people, people that have had the name Spider-Man who were not in this movie, or at least not in this movie under the role of Spider-Man. There's a character by the name of Ben Reilly who is known as the Scarlet Spider. Ben Reilly was actually a Peter Parker clone in the comics who was murdered by, at some point, was murdered by the Green Goblin. But he actually took over as Spider-Man while Peter Parker kind of retired, took a hiatus to spend more time with his family. Ben Reilly was Spider-Man for a little while, an actual clone of Peter Parker. Another character that we had was Maddie Franklin, who was Spider-Woman. We saw this in the Gathering of Five storyline where she kind of took up the mantle of Spider-Woman. However, she was killed during the Gauntlet and Grim Hunt storylines. So her character, wasn't a permanent character in the comics. During the Dead No More, the Clone Conspiracy storyline, though, her character did come back for a little bit, but it wasn't very long lived. So her character didn't last very long there either. And then finally, we have Otto Octavius, aka Doc Ock, who became Spider-Man during the Dying Wish storyline. Peter Parker was actually dying, and Doc Ock basically put himself into Peter Parker's body to prove that he could be, one, a better Spider-Man than Peter Parker, and two, a better person than Doc Ock. Again, that didn't last very long either. Doc Ock ended up sacrificing himself to bring actual Peter Parker back to life after Green Goblin kind of started taking over the city due to Doc Ock not really living up to his own expectations. So for a while there, Doc Ock was actually Spider-Man.
I like to go ahead and talk about the callbacks in this movie. So there's a lot of Sam Raimi callbacks. So for example, one of the big examples that is noticeable is with Spider-Man and Spider-Man 3, when he's out there doing his disco dancing, it shows him doing the same thing, not in the same suit and emo haircut, but in the same suit, but he's doing that whole dancing part, and he made a comment in the movie, he's like, oh yeah, we don't talk about that one. And then there's another callback with Spider-Man 2 and the Sam Raimi ones, where he's in the, basically, I guess, some type of cafe restaurant talking to MJ, and where Doc Ock throws a car, and then he dodges it. Well, this time he actually catches the car and basically throws it back. So there's another callback there. And there's one of the most famous scenes where he's doing the upside down kiss with Mary Jane from the first movie, and then they also go back to Aunt May's backyard, which looks almost exactly the same. Like they just basically redrew what the backyard was. And those part with Stan Lee, he made a quote, and it just hit you a little bit harder than other times, because then we knew that Stan Lee just passed away just before this movie was released. So just those types of things in those callbacks, it's always a really nice thing. A nice touch that they did.
So one of Wilson Fisk's main reasons for creating this collider machine was to try and see his wife and son who had passed away. He was trying to find alternate versions of them in alternate dimensions and bring them back to him. This is actually loosely based on a comic storyline from Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 issue number 3, which came out in November of 2017. This comic actually uses Wilson Fisk as the point of view character, whereas in this comic he helps someone travel to another dimension to meet a dimensional alternate of that person's deceased girlfriend. So in the comic, Wilson Fisk is actually helping someone else see their deceased loved one, whereas in the movie, Wilson Fisk is trying to see his own deceased loved one. Fun fact, the person from the comic book that he is actually trying to help is an evil Miles Morales.
Let's talk about the different types of non-Spider-Man characters, specifically the villains, because the villains are portrayed a little bit different than what they are in the comics. So, for example, Otto Octavius, in this movie, it's Olivia Octavius. And it turns out that Olivia Octavius this is her first starring as a new character in this movie. So I couldn't find any references in comics, and I was reading some other places that this was her debut in this movie. And I have to say that it was actually a very, very great job in terms of how the character is portrayed, what she is, actress that portrayed her. I thought it was a very good thing, and I'm hoping to see more. Another one is the Green Goblin. So normally Norman Osborn, he's in a suit or in a mask most of the time. In this movie, he's more as a large winged goblin that spits fire. It's more like a type of goblin dragon type of character. Then we have the Scorpion character is Matt Gargan. He actually looks pretty similar as in the comics. There's a little bit of differences, but not too much. You have Tombstone, played by Lonnie Lincoln, or character Lonnie Lincoln. Actually, his first appearance is issue 36, and he actually looks pretty similar to the comics as well. And then you have Wilson Fisk, also known as Kingpin, of course. Looks like he's much, much stronger than he is in the comics in portraying that. Size, from what I was reading, they're more mainly all above like 7 feet around that area. But him being able to catch buses and things in that part, I never really seen that in the comics. So these characters are very well portrayed, and I think bring a different interest. Now, for example, like Tombstone, he didn't really talk, of course, and so there was nothing there. But for Scorpion, he looked very well, and then also when Olivia Octavius was another one.
So this movie, like a lot of movies of this genre, ended kind of setting up that, the story of Miles Morales, the story that we saw in this movie, isn't done yet. The movie ends with, Miles Morales, laying down, and he hears Gwen Stacy call out to him, and I cannot remember exactly what she said to him, but she was calling out to him and he heard her. So it seems that Gwen Stacy has somehow found a way to cross from her dimension to his, which kind of sets up a sequel. A sequel for this movie has actually already been announced, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, or it was announced that it was going to be released on April 8th, 2022. However, it was pushed back 6 months to October 7th, just due to COVID-19. Joaquim Dos Santos is set to direct it, and David Callman is set to write it. The sequel is going to go ahead and continue Miles' story. It's going to feature Takuya Yamashiro, who is the main character of the Japanese Spider-Man series. So it looks like they are going to be bringing in additional spider characters, spider people into this movie. I think, Gio, we can pretty much, assume that Spider-Gwen is going to be a part of it as well, just due to hearing her voice there at the end. There's already a sequel kind of in the works for this movie. So that's kind of exciting.
Oh yeah, absolutely, especially of how they can further the storyline and what other characters they can bring. Like, for example, in this movie, at the very, very end, they show Spider-Man 2099, which is a futuristic Spider-Man. And so I'm interested in seeing what he can do in this movie as well. His character is not Peter Parker, it's Miguel O'Hara. And so that's a completely different character as well. So it'll be interesting to see. Also seeing what other Spider-Man, like is Silk Spider going to be in this one, like how you were mentioning before. But I'm waiting to see if they change up the animation or if they add something completely different to the animation in terms of the characters. So
yeah, we'll have to see, because there's been a lot of things from this movie. There's even been talk of a spin-off called Spider-Women, which is going to focus on Spider-Gwen, as well as Jessica Drew, aka Spider-Woman, and Cindy Moon, aka Silk, like you just mentioned. It's actually a film that is in the works. They've already got Lauren Montgomery and Beck Smith signed on as director and screenwriter, respectively. So the Spider-Women movie seems like one that is also going to happen. So we don't know if Spider-Gwen will be played by the same actress, or I should say voiced by the same actress as in this movie. Hope so, just to kind of keep that continuity. Yeah, Haley Steinfeld. I could not remember her name. But yeah, it would be nice if she was, just to kind of continue that continuity and keep up the same animation style, the same look for the characters. And then also John Mulaney has expressed interest in starring in a Spider-Ham or a Peter Porker movie. So, it seems that we could get a few spin-offs from this Into the Spider-Verse movie that aren't, actual direct sequels.
Oh yeah, so that'll be really interesting and fun. And I completely forgot about John Mulaney and him playing Peter Porker. He did a very good job in playing him.
Yeah.
And he's always that stand-up comedian. So just his the way he delivers is always fun too.
So, what did you, what did you think of the movie? Like, just overall, like, how did you like it?
Oh, overall, I don't know. I think it's one of the, if not the, but one of the top best comic book adaptations of movies, especially if it's animated.
Yeah.
And so just how it was delivered, how they interpret things, how they brought characters in there. And even though there's a lot of characters, they give you time to, it's like, okay, well, we're going to give you a backstory, but they're going to give us like a 1 minute backstory on them. But it's enough to know about that character. So I like how they do that. And so overall, I really enjoyed the movie. And waiting for the sequel will be a good thing.
Yeah, like I really like the way that they handled the movie. It was very comic bookish, the movie. Like, not just the animation style and the way it was presented, but like just all the different characters. Like, because in other comic book movies, you have your, like, whoever your superhero is. You've got Spider-Man, or you have Batman, or you have Iron Man, or whoever the case may be, and you have one of those characters. You don't have like a bunch of other Spider-Mans coming in from other universes and stuff. The closest you get to that is like Endgame, but the Endgame didn't nearly take that as far as this movie did, as far as all the characters like coming together and interacting with each other. You had two different versions of Peter Parker in this movie. You had the female Spider-Gwen. You had them all here together, which is I think something that I'm learning is something that you see in the comics, pretty often or from time to time, but you don't really see that in movies. So I thought it was really neat that they brought that in to the movie here. Like I said, that animation style, it took me a little bit of time to get used to it as I was watching the movie, but by the end of the movie, I was a fan. So I enjoyed this movie as well.
And like you were saying, like the score in the movie, it was actually very well done as well.
Mm-hmm.
The parts for when Miles Morales is finally getting comfortable with his abilities and finally making that leap, and just the music changes from when he was first starting off. The music or the score for when Prowler comes out, it was very kind of like a dark electronic type of score. So it resembles each character and how they are. So that's actually very well done as well.
Yeah, and the fact that you bring up Prowler, and this is something we didn't really touch on in the video, but like the whole character of Prowler and who he was to Miles. Prowler was his Uncle Aaron, and Prowler was working for Wilson Fisk. Miles's parents, I think that was his dad's brother, Jefferson's brother. It seemed that that Aaron and Jefferson didn't really see eye to eye all the time, but Miles felt very close to him. Like when he had, a bad day at, his first day at his new school, he went to see his Uncle Aaron, and it was Uncle Aaron that took him down to that abandoned subway station to, just, show him how to,
express his art.
Yeah. His Uncle Aaron was a big, I guess, role model in his life.
Yeah, that was his Uncle Ben from
exactly.
the other movies. Mm-hmm. And so each of them had their own, what really drove them, and him, it was his Uncle Aaron. Yeah,
because after, Uncle Aaron died from Wilson Fisk shooting him, all the characters, pretty much told him, hey, we've all lost people, but, that's what drives us, is to, so that, their death, basically isn't in vain. When Aaron Prowler was about to kill him until he took his mask off and he saw who he was. When that happened, like a part of me was like, oh, what is he gonna do? Is he gonna not do it because he's family, or is he gonna, is he really a scummy person and gonna go ahead and go through with it because that's his job? But no, he was not gonna do it, and obviously that's why Wilson Fisk shot him. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that was just something that we didn't bring up that we should have, just because Uncle Aaron, first of all, is his person that he lost, and I think is a big part of the reason why he was eventually able to, kind of focus his powers and control his powers, to be able to use them to the most extent, I guess would be the word to use.
Well,
there.
it was his Uncle Aaron as well as his dad, because the scene where his dad came to a door where he was already he was tied up in his chair, wanted to talk to him about his uncle, and wanted to see him and talk to him, and he wasn't able to. So that also brought him to that point. That's where he was able to use his ability, electricity ability that he had, to be able to remove himself. So yeah, and so just those two characters, like, family was such a big deal to him. It was such a big catalyst, I guess would be a word. So yeah.
So, Gio, this is going to be the last video that we upload this month. So, of all the movies that we've watched this month, and even the one in May, we've got Knives Out, The Rise of Skywalker, Detective Pikachu, Joker, and now this movie. Which one's been your favorite?
So for the movies that we just watched, I think it would have to be The Joker. The reason for that is, Into the Spider-Verse came a very, very close second. I thought Knives Out was going to be very close, but Into the Spider-Verse basically leaped over them pretty easily. And then The Joker was at a different level. The reason why Joker intrigued me is just because how Joker was delivered, how the score in the movie, how they portrayed him, how they made, they changed the perspective for him to make you feel, to look more on his side, as opposed when you know that he's going to be a big villain in any movie, but they just made him more, I guess, like down to earth, and that these things can happen to other people, and just being pushed that far, and just the way that the color scheme in the movie, and so just those parts of the movies that really intrigued me. But like I said, Spider-Verse came in a very, very, very close second. What about you?
Yeah, I probably have to agree. I'm surprised you didn't say The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah. So what did you think about this movie?
No, I mean, I agree. No comment there, huh? The Joker, for me, it's the Joker as well. I like the fact that the Joker was a completely original story. And I think I made the comment when we actually recorded the video for that movie, whereas any other comic book movie that you watch, they borrow heavily from the comics when it comes to characters, storylines, things of that nature. They all borrow heavily from the comics. Even this comic did. Or this movie, I should say, did. The whole, Collider thing with, Wilson Fisk trying to, see his family. All these, characters that came through. We saw Green Goblin, Doc Ock, Kingpin, Scorpion, Tombstone, all these characters, all these villains from the comics. And then you get the Joker, which is still based on a well-known comic book character, but it's like they didn't rely completely on the comics. Like, I feel like that's the kind of movie that you can go into not knowing anything about the Joker, not knowing anything about the comics, and still enjoy it. I think that's just kind of what sold me on that movie. The fact that they were able to make a complete standalone story, and make it work for this character that for years and decades, and however long the character of the Joker has been around, he's been a character that we're supposed to hate. He is the hero's enemy, and we're not supposed to like this guy, but this movie got you empathizing with him and rooting for him. You know, with this movie, Spider-Man, you're supposed to root for Spider-Man. You know, you're supposed to, you know, root against Wilson Fisk and against Doc Ock, you know. You're not supposed to root for the Joker. But that movie made me root for the Joker. So I think just all of that is why, of the movies we've watched this month, the Joker is definitely my favorite.
Okay. So Joker is going to be our top movie of the month. We're going to go ahead and do a series where after each month, we're going to review our movies, and then we're going to pick the best movie at the month. And then at the end of the year, we'll go ahead and combine those movies and pick the best movie out of the nominees that we chose from there.
Yep.
All right.
So yeah, stick around here with us to the end of the year so that you can see that and you know, have a little bit of say in what the final best movie of the year is for us. Well, you've just watched our thoughts and opinions on Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Let us know down in the comments what you think about this movie, and if you notice anything we didn't, I'm sure there's a lot of topics that we didn't cover. So if you want to talk about those down there in the comment section, go for it.
Please like, subscribe, comment. They help a ton. Follow us on Twitter at Buddy Cinema. And yeah.
Thank you for watching. We are Matt and Gio, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.